haunting of Emily's Diner. Emily's Diner was the oldest restaurant in the small town of Willow Creek. Its red brick exterior and neon sign flickered through the fog on quiet, chilly nights. For generations, the townsfolk had gathered there for meals, unaware of the sinister history buried beneath the friendly atmosphere. But those who worked the late shifts whispered tales of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, the sound of footsteps echoing in the empty hallways, and the chilling voice of a woman crying softly in the night. It was said that Emily, the original owner, had disappeared mysteriously over 50 years ago. Some believed she had run off. Others thought she met a darker fate. But the staff, especially those working the late shifts, believed Emily never truly left. It was a rainy autumn evening when Alice, a new waitress, took the night shift. The diner was nearly empty, with only a couple of regulars huddled in a corner booth. The kitchen was quiet, and the dim lights cast eerie shadows across the tables. As Alice refilled the coffee pots, she noticed a figure sitting at the counter. She hadn't heard the door open or seen anyone come in, but there he was, a man in an old-fashioned suit, staring down at an empty plate. His clothes looked like they were from another era, worn and slightly tattered. "Can I get you something?" Alice asked, approaching cautiously. The man didn't respond. He kept his gaze fixed on the plate, his fingers slowly tracing the rim. A sense of unease crept up Alice's spine. Suddenly the bell above the door jingled, and Alice turned her head, distracted by the sound. When she looked back at the counter, the man was gone. The plate, however, was still there, smeared with fresh food that hadn't been served in decades. Her heart raced, but she dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks on her. She had heard the stories but didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. As the night wore on, the regulars left, and Alice found herself alone in the diner. She was cleaning up the tables when she heard it. The soft sobbing of a woman, faint but unmistakable. It seemed to be coming from the back of the diner, near the kitchen. Alice's pulse quickened. She grabbed her phone, using its flashlight to pierce through the dim light. "Hello?" she called, her voice shaky. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by silence. The kitchen was empty, just as she'd left it earlier. But when she turned to leave, she noticed something odd. A large butcher knife lay on the floor, directly in her path. It hadn't been there before. Terrified, she hurried back to the front of the diner, only to find that all the chairs had been stacked upside down on the tables. She hadn't done it. No one else had been in the diner since the regulars left. Then she saw her, a woman in a long white dress, standing by the counter where the man had been earlier. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her lips trembled as she whispered, "Help me." Alice stumbled backward, her throat tight with fear. The woman pointed toward the kitchen door, her fingers shaking. "Help me," she repeated, her voice desperate. Suddenly the diner plunged into darkness. The lights flickered wildly, and the air grew cold. Alice felt something brush past her, cold and swift, like a breeze that shouldn't be there. The sobbing returned, louder now, filling the room with its mournful sound. Panicking, Alice grabbed her phone and ran for the door. But the moment she reached for the handle, it refused to budge. She pulled harder, her heart pounding, but the door remained sealed as if something was holding it shut. A loud crash came from the kitchen, followed by the sound of metal scraping against tile. The sobbing turned into a wail, echoing through the walls of the diner. Alice turned, her back pressed against the door, eyes wide with terror. She saw shadows moving across the walls, tall, dark figures shifting in and out of view. The woman in white had vanished, but her presence lingered in the cold air around Alice. Then, out of nowhere, a voice, deep and guttural, whispered in her ear, "Leave now." The door behind her creaked open, and without a second thought, Alice bolted outside into the pouring rain. She ran down the empty streets, her breaths shallow, not stopping until the diner was a distant blur behind her. The next morning, the owner of Emily's Diner found the place in disarray. Chairs stacked oddly on tables, utensils scattered across the floor, and the scent of something burning in the air. Alice never returned to work, and no one heard from her again. But the rumors continued to grow. Some said the diner was cursed, that Emily's restless spirit sought revenge for an unspeakable crime committed there years ago. Others believed the diner was a portal, a place where the living and the dead could cross paths. One thing was certain. Those who ventured into Emily's Diner after dark often found themselves haunted by more than just memories. And if you ever find yourself passing through Willow Creek on a rainy night, you might want to skip a meal at Emily's Diner, because once you step inside, you may never come out. A few weeks passed since Alice's disappearance, but the whispers about Emily's Diner grew louder. The diner stood untouched. No one dared to work the night shifts anymore, and even the daytime crowd had dwindled. Locals avoided the place, glancing warily at its darkened windows and flickering neon sign. But the mystery of Emily's Diner attracted a different kind of attention. One rainy evening, a paranormal investigator named Ryan Turner arrived in Willow Creek. He had heard of the haunting stories surrounding the diner and was drawn to them, eager to uncover the truth. His podcast, Into the Unknown, was known for exploring real haunted locations. Ryan believed that Emily's Diner could be his breakthrough, a case that would finally prove the existence of the supernatural. Ryan wasn't alone. His cameraman, Jake, and sound engineer, Sarah, had come along, equipped with the latest ghost hunting technology. They planned to spend the night in the diner, documenting any paranormal activity and unraveling the mystery behind Emily's disappearance. As they arrived at the diner, the wind howled and the rain drummed against the windows. The red neon sign buzzed faintly, casting an eerie glow over the entrance. Ryan adjusted the camera on his shoulder, his heart pounding with excitement and a tinge of fear. "All right, we're here," he said into the microphone clipped to his jacket. "Emily's Diner, where employees have reported ghostly apparitions, strange voices, and even objects moving on their own. Tonight, we're going to see if these stories are true." Jake set up his equipment while Sarah checked the audio levels. "I don't like this place," Sarah muttered. "It feels off." Ryan gave her a reassuring smile. "That's exactly why we're here. We're going to get answers." They stepped inside the diner. The door creaked as it opened, and a chill seemed to follow them in. The air was thick with the smell of grease, dust, and something else. Something metallic, like blood. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked linoleum floor. The diner was eerily quiet, save for the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe. Ryan motioned to Jake to start filming. "Emily's Diner has been abandoned for weeks now," Ryan said into the camera. "Many believe the spirit of Emily, the original owner, still lingers here. Tonight, we're going to find out if those stories are more than just legend." They began their investigation, sweeping the diner with their EMF meters and thermal cameras. As they moved deeper into the building, the air grew colder. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, but whenever they turned to look, nothing was there. Hours passed with little activity. Ryan was starting to grow frustrated. "Maybe this place isn't as haunted as they say," he said, his voice tinged with disappointment. But just as the words left his mouth, the temperature plummeted, and the lights flickered violently. The three of them froze, staring at each other in alarm. "Did you feel that?" Jake whispered. Sarah's eyes widened. "Something's here." Suddenly, the EMF meter in Ryan's hand spiked, and a soft, mournful sob echoed through the diner. It was faint at first, but grew louder, coming from the direction of the kitchen. Ryan signaled for them to follow him. They moved cautiously toward the kitchen door, the sobbing growing more intense with each step. When they pushed open the door, the sound stopped abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. The kitchen was just as Alice had described, cold, empty, but with a lingering sense of something wrong. Then from the far corner of the room, a shadow shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to send chills down their spines. Jake swung the camera in that direction. "What was that?" Ryan crept forward, his flashlight shaking slightly in his hand. As he reached the spot, he froze. There, lying on the floor, was a photograph, a black and white picture of a woman. She was young, with soft features and a kind smile. Beneath the photo, the name Emily was scrawled in faded ink. Ryan knelt down to pick it up, but the moment his fingers touched the photograph, a deafening crash echoed through the kitchen. Pots and pans flew off the shelves, clattering to the floor. The temperature dropped again and the sobbing returned, louder now, filled with anguish. "Get out," a voice whispered, so close it felt like it was right beside them. Sarah screamed, dropping her equipment as the shadows around them began to move. Dark figures circled the room, their outlines shifting and flickering in the dim light. The sobbing morphed into a wail, a sound so full of sorrow and anger that it made their skin crawl. Ryan clutched the photograph tightly, his heart racing. "We need to leave, now." But as they turned to flee, the kitchen door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. Jake rushed to the door, pulling desperately at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "We're trapped," he yelled, his voice panicked. The wailing grew louder, and the shadows in the room converged toward them. The figure of a woman appeared in the corner, her white dress glowing faintly in the darkness. Her face was obscured, but her eyes, deep hollow pits, stared directly at Ryan. "Help me," she whispered, her voice trembling with despair. Ryan backed away, his mind racing. "Emily's, is that you?" But the woman didn't answer. Instead, her form flickered and then vanished, leaving the room in total darkness. Suddenly, the door flew open with a violent crash, and the oppressive cold lifted. Without hesitation, the three bolted from the kitchen, running through the diner and out into the pouring rain. They didn't stop until they were back at their car, breathless and soaked. The next day, Ryan reviewed the footage. It was all there, every crash, every flickering light, the shadows moving on their own. But the most chilling part was the final shot of the photograph, lying on the kitchen floor. The woman's face, once kind and soft, had changed. Her eyes were dark, filled with sorrow and anger. Ryan knew then that they had uncovered something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Emily's spirit was real, and she wasn't at peace. As they packed up to leave Willow Creek, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the diner's dark history. Something terrible had happened there, something far worse than the locals could imagine. And until the truth was revealed, the hauntings would never stop. But the real question lingered in Ryan's mind. Who was responsible for Emily's fate? And why did her spirit cry out for help? Perhaps the answers were buried in the diner's past. Or maybe some mysteries were never meant to be solved.